fine. That's usually a good amount of time, but all right. Okay, everyone. It says we're live. Welcome to another author hangout. And today I'm so excited. We have A.L. Jackson, aka Amy, is here to talk with us today. And we're going to get into her new release, as well as just talk romance books in general. We have some topics to cover, but just to give people a couple minutes to hop in, I just like to start off with a few questions that all of us readers love to know and love to find out. And that's simply just like, what have you been reading lately? Or are you reading anything right now? Just let us know what you're up to.
So I have not had a lot of time to read lately. I've been on deadlines with like 2 different books and then having a release at the same time. So it's been a little chaotic the last month, and we moved at the end of December. So it's been kind of crazy, but I did get to stop and listen to, or not stop, I was able to listen to Laura Pavlov's, oh my gosh, what's it called? I am the worst with titles, but
me too. I usually know.
Still My Heart. Still My Heart. That is what it is. Her most recent release, and it's so good. So that was really nice. I was like unpacking while I was listening. So
yeah, that is definitely the positive of audiobooks. I've gotten through so many more books in the past few years when I could just put those in. So definitely helpful. Yes. Yeah. And then let's see. So people are just hopping in. Hi from Chicago. Hello, Tiffany. Glad you're here. Hi, Taylor. Thanks for joining us. Now that people are hopping on too, just to tell everyone, I have as usual for these, I have a list of questions already that I'm going to go through. But if you guys have questions as we're going, put them in the comments. And at the end, I'll have a few minutes to go through yours. So just share that for as people hop in here. But then I always love to ask, what books first got you into reading romance? Is that where you started reading, or when did you first start reading romance?
So, of course, I love like Ginny B. Jones and like those type of books when I was young, but I also used to sneak my grandmother's Harlequin romances from her. She had like a little stand in her living room. I wouldn't call it a bookshelf. It was like a little thing that she had, and I was obsessed with them. Like I started with romance, and that's just what I've always been addicted to.
Yeah. My mom always had boxes in the basement, and my room was in the basement. So definitely started reading.
You're like easy access.
Yeah, definitely started reading historical romance at like 14 years old for me. So.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah. So that is definitely one of the interesting things these days of like when books get like categorized in the wrong place. We don't love to see that, but I also think that I'm like, I really hunted down those books no matter what. So they're definitely.
It's very true. I mean, I would like see the cover, if it was a couple and a guy had on no shirt, I was like, that one is for me.
Yes. Yes. But I mean, obviously we don't want to have it purposely happen, but the curious minds, they'll find what they're going to find.
Yes, they do.
Yeah. Did you have like a favorite one of the Harlequin romance authors? I know there was like lots.
You know what? Yeah, I can't even pinpoint it. It was so, I was really young. So probably like in 3rd grade, I started reading them. So I can't really remember. I think the first book, and it's not a romance, but the first book that I can actually remember reading that was Gone with the Wind, and I was in 4th grade. So that's probably the first, and I loved it. And it was historical, which I read a lot of historical when I was younger, and then, transitioned over to contemporary.
Yeah. So who are some of your favorite romance authors today?
I like anything emotional. So I love Colleen Hoover, like something that's going to make me just like grip me from the beginning. I love Marnie Mann. I love like the really spicy, intense, angsty stories. If I want something really dark, I like Pam Godwin is really good.
Yes.
Catherine Cowles, of course, I love getting to read her stories early, and same as Laura Pavlov, the Small Town, gets me every time. So.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Pam Godwin is my like staple books. But did you read Frozen Fate last year? I think I saw you. Did you read that?
I had it, but I didn't get to read it. Yes. The last one I read was Sea of Ruin.
Oh,
that series.
Yeah. I think that was my second book I read by her. I did stumble across Dark Notes first, but then I read Sea of Ruin, and that's been.
It's so the writing in that is just it's phenomenal.
Oh my gosh, I know, definitely. Do you ever read any like non-romance books? Do you read in any other genres really at all, or do you just stick
Um, Not
whatever?
really. Like I find I just am not interested in picking them up. I've tried and I just don't get into them the same way.
Yeah, yeah, same. I always have this thing, like, I usually read between 1 to 5 a year when I hear something, like, really good about one.
Like I
And
got it. Yeah.
I can't take the stress. I can't take the stress of, like, if people don't end up together. Like, I just
I
can't.
know. And that's the thing is like, I'm like, I have this like perfect way that books are supposed to turn out. And I'm like, this is wrong. And
Yes.
then I realize I'm just reading the wrong genre. So
Exactly, exactly. People give me a hard time, and I was like, "I can read the most painful, darkest of romance you have, as long as I know it's a romance." So when I think some of the authors who wanna, like, tiptoe and say they're romance, but then don't wanna follow the one golden rule, I'm like, "No, you're just setting yourself up for people to be angry." Like,
yeah,
just
absolutely.
write your contemporary fiction, don't tell us it's romance, and then kill someone.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing is like I'm the same. Like you can drag me through the mud with them. Like I'm invested, but like I need, even if they're together on the last page, like that's all I need to know. And then the rest of them, like they're good to go. And I made that mistake when I first started writing. I was reading a lot and I picked up what I thought was supposed to be a romance, but it was a women's fiction, and both of
Ugh.
them killed themselves at the end. And I was like,
Mhm.
this author is no longer has my love. So
Yeah, yeah.
I was not a happy girl.
I was burned all the way back with, like, when, Atonement came out, like, when the movie came out, I read the book.
Oh, yes.
Oh, I think I was in, like, 7th or
Like
8th
seventh or
grade.
eighth.
And that was the first time I really was burned, that I was, like, aware that, "Oh, there's a difference." Like, just because
Yep.
there's happiness in one doesn't mean it will end that way, like,
Yeah.
now
And I'm
I'm
okay
like,
with that in a movie usually, and that movie wrecked me, but in a book it's just entirely different.
yeah, yeah, there's just something about, like, being in their hearts and their heads, and then yeah, I just can't. Very happy. So that's like anyway, as someone who like reviews the books, there'll be people are like, "Why don't you try this or this?" And I'm like, "No." Like, why? If I read that, I would just be mad and it would be a bad review, but like it's not the author's fault if they're not saying it's a romance. Like if the author
Yeah,
doesn't say it's a
exactly.
romance,
Yeah.
it's my fault.
Right. No, I totally agree.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so moving into some writing stuff. So when did you first get into writing then? When did you first start transitioning to that?
So I started writing about 15 years ago, I think. It's been almost 15 years, which is insane to me. And my kids were just a little bit older. My youngest was out of the toddler stage. I think he was like 6 at the time. And so he was, would go to bed at the normal, sleeping through the night. I didn't have like the toddler midnight, wakenings and all that kind of stuff. So my life was a little bit simpler. So I started reading before I'd go to sleep. And when I was way younger, like in college, I loved to write poetry and always thought I wanted to be a reporter or like a journalist because that's the only thing I thought I could do as a career with words or whatever. And that ended up not happening. So I just kind of like, I think it was just like tucked away inside of me because once I started reading a lot again, there was just like this little spark that I was like, I just want to try writing. I never thought I'd do anything with it, but I just had an idea for a book and sat down and wrote it and then just basically never stopped.
I love that. I love that. Was that first book that you wrote, did you publish that one or not?
I did. Yeah. So that was pulled and my best friend had read it. And, of course I was like embarrassed and like, oh my gosh, I'm writing this thing. And I did it in secret. I had like a little avatar that was like Midnight Murmur because my husband didn't know I was up all night writing these books. So I had like this little writing group. And so it felt like this big scandalous secret of what I was doing. And I showed it to my best friend. She was like, oh my gosh, this is really good. You have to get this published. So I ended up sending it to a small indie publisher and published through them. And then that was like right when the indie revolution was hitting. So then I was like, ooh, I think I really want to like publish these books myself. And so that's kind of how it all started.
Right. Okay. Did you have a day job at that time, or were you a stay-at-home mom, or like what were you
I
doing at
did.
that time?
So I worked from home. I owned a medical transcription service.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Didn't get enough of like typing and doing all that.
No, I just needed to like also stay up all night and do it too. I can't tell you writing romance is a little bit more interesting than typing medical records all day.
Right. No, I bet it is, but I'd be like sick of my computer by the end of the day. But I guess, you know, I mean, I'm the same way. Like, I read for pleasure for how many years, and now I basically do it for a job. And it's like, do you get tired? I'm like, no, I've done it for 20 years. I'm not tired of it.
And you're like still, and that's the thing, if it's like a burning passion inside you, you just can't not do it. So
yeah. Well, and you're never like done. You know, you're never done. So there's always something new and exciting. I just switch like genres to something if I want, you know? So yeah. So for you when you're writing, what usually comes first? And I know this is usually a hybrid answer for authors, but on the whole, do you usually picture the characters first, or do you come up with like a plot? Or I know you write a lot of the small towns. Do you picture like the town first? Like what kind of comes up for you?
I would think definitely the group of heroes, like the main characters. I usually like to envision, like, I like them to be the connection. And so I like to envision, how are they related, whether they're friends or they're brothers, or it's a mix of both, or they're brought together by some, job or town or whatever it may be. And so I think I usually picture those guys and know that they're really close. And then I start to dream up like who is going to be their female main character, like who's going to come, the heroine that's going to come and bring them to their knees kind of thing. So I think it starts with them, and then I kind of build the world around that, like, because I write morally gray characters, and it's romantic suspense, so I need like those suspense elements. So I try to figure out like, what did they do wrong, who's after them, those pieces, because that's really the most important, like, to build the story around that. And then I usually figure out like how that the heroine fits into that.
Like that. This one's more broad. This is just a fun one. Like, and I think I know the answer. What is your favorite? Or no, I know which one you love to write. Your single parents you love to write. This is the opposite of that. What's a trope that you have yet to write, or that you would like a second chance at because you didn't quite love how you did it before?
Oh, well, that's hard because I tend to write a lot. I write a lot of single parents. I started doing that, and I just continue to because it's my favorite thing. Yeah. So I would think like, I don't know, I might like to do like more of a, rather than small town, like a big city type story sometime with like a very, corporate heroine maybe, and, maybe a enemies to lovers type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of suspense options you can get into when you're in the city too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. Okay. So let's I can't think of the transition. That's the word I'm trying to say. What inspired you to try like Romantasy with your new story?
So when I first started writing, I think I kind of wanted to write paranormal. I was very, it was like during like I loved Twilight. Like that was like my favorite thing. And I'd read a lot of paranormal at that time. And so I think I thought that I was going to be writing paranormal. So this story has been in my head forever, but I ended up writing Hold first, and it's contemporary, but it has like a couple of like little supernatural elements to it, not on a grand scope, but like they have like a higher connection. And so I started to write Visions of Darkness way back then, like 12, 13 years ago. And I kind of freaked myself out writing it. And I think at the end of the day, it was that it just wasn't the right time for it. Really, paranormal was dropping off at the time. And 50 Shades of Grey had just come out. And so people were really looking for, more contemporary, spicier stories. And so I kind of transitioned over to that as well. Like, but that story was always there. So I'm excited that I finally got to do it.
Yeah. Well, and I definitely have like, we won't go to like spoilers for anybody, but as I just read this one 2 weeks ago, I think that I read it before it came out. And I just found the world in this very interesting. Like that seems like such a benign word to use, but without like, I just found it to be very like interesting and very like just rooted in a lot of like painful things in it. I don't know how to word that, but I'm just wondering where kind of that concept of this.
So
I know it's tough. People who've read it,
it is hard to describe because it is a really unique story. I don't think I've read anything like it before, and I'm seeing in the reviews that because I was kind of like, okay, when I get this out here, somebody's gonna be like, oh yeah, this is just like XYZ. Right. But I just keep hearing people say, I've never read a book like this before. Like totally like.
Yeah,
it's just kind of different. It has like a really intense, like, the characters are, the connections. So it's really a love story, but also there's a lot of crazy things happening in the background. And so it's kind of based on like, the idea of spiritual battles, but like humans being involved in them. And so like, what would that look like if, somebody were to go to sleep at night and they had to fight for, the well-being of humans and like fight against evil entities. And so it's just like that idea came from it, and I built it around that. And so the idea that it was, you know, a young girl like trying to understand, you know, she felt so different and misunderstood, and it just created a lot of tension and I think vulnerability and like realness to the story. Like, you know, she's such a real character to me, like a real person. So doing it that way was just, you know, that was really my inspiration, as like a young girl like going through this and what that might look like.
Right. Yeah, I know one of the things that really hit me about it too is that it was just a really good sorry, it's so hard to pinpoint it, but like a really good allegory for how heavy, like, which word do I want to use? I don't necessarily want to say mental illness, but like the dark thoughts that people have, you know, and having that be manifested in, you know, really it's not always people's fault. You know, it's very rarely your fault that you're having those type of things. And so that was really what kept me like sucked into that, because it's such a heavy thing, but it's also like, well, where do those come from? So I found that how you were tackling that to be very like compelling for sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you kind of said that, but what was kind of the inspiration for Fedor, like how you picture it in your mind and like what the world is kind of like and everything?
So I was just picturing like what would like a world of like, you know, and I don't call them demons in the story, but that's basically what they are, right? So like what would that look like? Like what on like I have no concept of that. So like I had to like make this up, and like to me, what would that look like if there was this like horrible place where like all evil came from? And so that's, you know, that just spurred like what, you know, because it was just like really barren, and there's not a lot of, you know, when it's like I say fantasy, you know, normally fantasy worlds are, you know, different towns and cities and all these things, you know, where this is just like this dark, barren, horrible place that's like all the same, and there's just, you know, so that's just the way that I envisioned that would be.
Interesting. I like that. Were there any real big changes from the beginning to the end for you? And obviously there are changes if you started this 12 years ago, now that you've said that. I understand there definitely were. But are there you could pick out that aren't maybe like spoilers, like things you had maybe had in, but now that aren't?
You know, I had written only 30,000 words of it, and I had initially thought it would be one book, and then it's Montlake, done through Montlake, so they wanted 2 books for it. And so I just had to kind of expand in my mind, like what, like I needed to figure out like how to make this all come together over 200,000 words rather than 100,000 words. And really the first 30,000 words, like there were some changes, but really minimal changes.
Okay, I like that. I think you maybe answered this question too, because I was wondering how many books were going to be in here after the cliffhanger.
Yeah, so it's just a duet. So just the 2 of them. They, you know, it is actually written. It's in editing right now, so they'll be coming to you soon.
Sweet. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Since I know that audio is a big like part of, you know, you always like to have your audios ready when your stories come out. I do have a few questions about those. And just kind of like, what do you love most about audiobooks? What kind of got you into listening to them? This is a weird question to say, what do you love most about this? But also the question, you know what the first one was that you listened to? I was like,
oh, wow. That's the first one. Okay, so like I'll go back to the first question. So really, you know, I started doing audio myself really early in the game. It was my first 2 books, Pulled and Take This Regrets. There was this kind of new narrator named Andy Art that had messaged me. Oh wait, can you hear me?
Yep, I hear you.
Okay, good. Something weird happened here, so I'm gonna change you.
Okay.
Let me actually. I think my car tried to turn off, and it's like no longer on the speakers.
Okay.
Well, let me see if it comes back on or not.
Yeah, the Bluetooth may be cut off, but we can.
Sorry, guys.
Nope, you're good.
I apologize. Okay.
All right.
So, anyway, she had messaged me, and she was just like starting out on her own, and I had just gotten a deal with Tantor, which is one of the audio publishers, and I had just messaged them and gave her name to them, and they ended up using her. And then I just worked with her on every book since then until like 3 years ago.
Wow. That's so great. Yeah, she's a great one. I love that. So then, yeah, do you remember what's the first one that you ever listened to? Like for you personally?
Oh my gosh, sorry. Now I have the radio coming on. Um, I think the first audiobook I listened to, like, ever in my life was a thriller that my husband and I listened to, like, during a road trip, but I could not remember the name of it. I think it was a Stephen King.
That makes sense, yeah. Yeah, I was such a snob to them for a long time. I didn't understand why people like them. So I'm definitely a very staunch supporter of them now. They're one of my favorite ways to read, but I
I
like
think
to
it
hear when people started.
takes a minute to get used to it. Like, for
Mhm.
me, it was, especially for, like, my own books, as I'm writing these stories over months, I have, like, specific voices in my head. And
Yeah,
so when it's a different voice all of a sudden, it can be hard to listen to. But I think I just had to force myself to, like, get used to it and realize, like, it's going to be different and that this is
yeah,
like an actor portraying your character type of thing. And then once I realized that and accepted that, then I love them.
right, right. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think for me too, it's like every heroine sounds like yourself when you read it as as a reader. So having to give some of that over to
Yeah.
someone
Is
else.
every hair in your face too for you?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
same.
Yeah, or she
I
doesn't
like
have
keep asking people that because I think that is like pretty common.
right. But it's funny because I think people who read, like, fantasy novels, I think they aren't always, because I don't know, I think it's pretty distinctive, like, if you read first person books, you're maybe more used to that. Some people just do not like first person books, so they don't get into
Yeah.
romance as much, and I'm like, I can't handle it if they're not. Like, I mean, I
Yeah.
can,
I
but
mean, third person's hard for me. I love to do my flashbacks in third person just
right.
because I think it distinguishes them, that it makes it feel more distant. But that's why I
Mhm.
like first person because you're like closer to the character.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was gonna say, I like that about, your books. Particularly, I like it even more in Visions of Darkness because it very much makes the 2 worlds feel distinct.
Yes. And a
That
little more
really
haunting. Like I was able to use different, like the way that I was able to write those sentences, I think really just deepened
yeah,
it on, like,
yeah,
to a different level.
yeah. Well, I know you already mentioned Andy, but who are some of your favorite narrators to either work with or listen to? Who are some of your favorites right now?
Oh man, it's like hard to pick favorites because I work with so many incredibly talented people. But well, I'll start with Visions of Darkness because I had listened to a paranormal and it was narrated by um I'm gonna mess her name up. I think it's Victoria May,
Yeah,
or
okay.
I
That's
think
last
that's what
one.
her name is, who narrated
Mhm.
that. And she just had I'd never heard of her before, had never listened to a book with her, and I think it was called Vampire God.
Okay.
And she just had this incredible paranormal voice, and she did this Vampire God's voice like she does. Oh, it was amazing. Like I got chills every time she went into the male main character's, growly, like
Yeah.
sexy voice that he had. So I loved her. And I just had remembered it. It had been like a couple years before, and
Mhm.
Lake had asked me if I had any suggestions for Visions of Darkness,
Mhm.
and so I had suggested her. And then this is the first time I worked with Teddy Hamilton, and he was incredible. So that was
Yeah.
great. And
Yeah.
another duo I'm absolutely loving right now is when you get Desiree Ketchum and Connor Craze together. Like they
Mhm.
are love it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I always Connor is fantastic in any, like, cowboy or MC or, like, he very much works, really
Yeah,
good at like, I love
yeah. And that was the thing. I was having lunch with Andy like several years back, and her parents live in
Mhm.
the area so she could come visit them in the wintertime, and so we get
Mhm.
together for lunch. And she's like, I have this new male narrator. You're gonna love him. And it's Connor.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Connor Craze and Jason Clark, I love when I see them on a cowboy romance or,
Yes. So good.
like, mafia too. I'm always like, "Yes, this is gonna be good." Gets me so excited. Well, that's the question too then. Because this one was Mont, like you said, they asked for kind of suggestions that you had. I know you always been in control then of like your other ones, or your indie titles? Do you pick?
Yeah, I tried, and that's one of the reasons that I write so far ahead, just so that I can
Mhm.
book the narrators that I want. So what I try to do is, I have a core group of narrators I really like to work with, just because I know them and trust them. And plus, I do the children, and I need to know, like, that these typically, like, the male narrators can really pull these kids off.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so usually what I know how many books there's going to be in a series, and I'll try to like book out all the books with narrators so that it's all plotted out. They know exactly when they're going to get it. And then that way I have the narrators I want to work with for that series.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. So do you kind of know like who you want to do which couple then ahead of time? Because this is like, do you imagine who's gonna do
Not
it?
necessarily. Like I just work with such a great pool that I know that they're going to do great with them no matter what. And I think that my the voices are always going to be different in my head. So I just have kind of like separated myself from that and just like they're taking the story and making it, how they see it. So
Okay, I love that. Okay. And then the last one I have for my question. So, guys, I'll be getting to some of yours here. We have a few minutes still with her here, but I just want to ask if you have any teases for book two for
for
us.
book two, well, I can say that book two starts off right where the first one left off.
It's
So we
better.
won't leave you hanging there. So we'll find out where the heck that Arya is. And so we learn a lot about the mystery man in the first chapter. But of course, it sparks a ton of other questions. And Arya and Pax kind of hit the road again, trying to figure out what is going on and where Arya's powers are coming from and why that this man wants to destroy her so badly. So this one is like crazy action packed.
Mhm.
Their relationship just grows through it. There's no no separation of the two of them or anything like that. It's just
Mhm.
about them coming together and also with their Laven family to defeat this like ultimate evil.
Okay. Okay. I thought of another question too because as a fan, I have this question. So this is me asking one of these. Well, I meant to ask a question about like if you thought about like why the like ages of the characters, because this one definitely to me did feel a bit more like it was new adult, or is it just because the age you needed the characters to be? Do you mean it to still feel very adult? Like, was there any thought into that? Because that was something that was just felt a little different to me.
Yeah.
Just
So
wondered.
when I initially started writing it years ago, my characters were a little bit younger at that time as well. Like now I'm really writing like, my characters are at least like 25-ish all the way to 40. My main
Mhm.
characters can be older. But at the time I was writing younger characters and knowing that I wanted to do the whole thing with her family and her being, put in the mental facility and um like I knew she needed to be on that cusp of becoming an adult, and I had to be really careful with how old Pax was. Of course, I didn't want him to be too old, but I knew he needed to be older than her, just because it just
Right.
wouldn't really fit if he wasn't. So,
Right.
so we did like kind of play with that, like was as we were in editing, because we wanted to make sure we were really thoughtful about it, and there weren't any confusion that that
Yeah.
it would have ever been inappropriate at any time, And
Right.
so we decided that we wanted to keep her like right there at 18 and the
Mhm.
ages and
Yeah.
so yeah, it was different and I don't know, I loved it though. Like it didn't really feel that different to me, but it was just like, a different time period. But also Arya is like so mature because of like the things that she's seen that she's
Yeah.
already, she has this huge amount of horrible experience, but while also being like innocent and, just
Yeah.
coming into being an adult. So I thought it was a
Mm.
really, really fun, even though it was very hard, but like it was
Mm.
just exhilarating for me as an author to be able to write that mesh of those two elements.
Yeah, I thought it might be something like that once because I think it is like hearing what her age was before I knew what you were doing. I was like, "Oh, wow. Okay. What's this?" But then for the story you told, I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, that makes
Yeah.
sense." Because what else?
I mean, I
Like,
can imagine them like I mean, I could have done it differently, but like for it to be
yeah.
like truly honest, I think like it had to
Mm.
come across that way.
Yeah. Well, and I felt for her parents so much too, because not to be like the old lady around, but I was like, "What would I do? What would I do if I was her mom?" Like, it definitely made me think that.
Seriously though, and that's why I wanted to be like I wanted her mom to be like she's not a villain in the story, Her mom just truly cared about her even though she like because of
Yeah.
their actions she got put in, she was in so much danger. So I wanted to
Yeah.
make that really raw and real for her mom as well as like her mom discovered like and that
Yeah.
the ending scenes with the parents was like for me was like the culmination of all that for Arya, like for her to be able to see the mom be able to see like, your daughter is like was never making this up was like so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, I have just a few questions from our audience here, and then we'll let you get on your way back to
All
the
right.
room. So, Paige wanted to ask, what music have you been listening to while you write?
Oh, awesome, Paige. You guys, I have been listening nonstop to Manchester Orchestra. This has been like my
Mm.
mellow. I usually am like a very I like screamo and like emo type music. I that's my go-to. but I've been listening a ton to Manchester Orchestra because they just have this like, there's a song that came out, The Silence, that is so beautiful and it's haunting, and it was like so perfect for this story. So I just had that on repeat the whole time I was writing it.
Love that. Love that. This is a good one. Thanks, Taylor. Did you have to change your writing style for Visions of Darkness since it was like fantasy paranormal? I mean, did you change anything?
Not that much. I had to change a little more just because it was traditional, and I usually write, my books are really tend to be poetic, and like the way that I can structure my sentences are a little bit different. So they wanted me to like tame it down just a little bit. They wanted to preserve my voice, but also like I didn't have like free reign like I normally do with my other stories. So that was a tiny bit different. And then, but I did feel like I made the like World of Fedor even like more in Tearsith, like more flowy. So I found like a really good balance with it. So basically I feel like I was writing the same, just like transitioning a tiny bit in between the worlds.
See, and that's so interesting to me because as soon as I heard you were writing a fantasy, I was like, her writing is meant to be in a fantasy. So I found that interesting that they had to pull back a little bit though, because I mean, one of the things that took a while for me to get used to your style was how like that was. And it wasn't until I like added audiobooks that I was like, oh, this is how we got to do this because it sounds so good.
It's
way.
very rhythmic and like you're just supposed to like slide into the vibe.
So anyway, I found that interesting. That was a great question, Taylor, because I wouldn't have
Thank
thought
you,
to
Taylor.
ask it. No. Yeah. And then if you could live in any fictional town that you've written, which one would you choose? There's a lot of
Put me on the
stuff.
spot.
Dangerous stuff happening in your town.
Okay, so I have to say Redemption Hills because that's probably my favorite series I've written all around. Just having finished it, like all the books are finished, and like I just loved every single one of those guys. I love the setting and the scenery and just everything about that series. So I think I'd be going to Redemption Hills if I could.
Yeah, that was my first book I read from you was that series. So I'm definitely happy.
It's a good place to start.
Yeah. I on NetGalley of all places. The first one.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
Yep. That's how I found you. So love that. Okay, just two more here. There is, where did you come up with the names for Aria and Pax? That's a great question.
Good question. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys in on a little, this is a little crazy. So, I started writing this 13 years ago. So I freaked myself out and then decided I wasn't going to write it. So I actually loved the Pax's character so much that I ended up using him as inspiration for my male main character in Come to Me Quietly, which was my first traditional release way back in 2014. And so originally their names were Alina and Jared in this story, who are now the characters in Come to Me Quietly. And so
you had to change his name.
I had to change them. So it was literally like opening back up this document and it's like Alina and Jared again, but in like this supernatural form, like amplified. And it just felt like coming home though. It was so incredible.
That is so 15 years ago paranormal names too. Like you can't
right?
Like Jared are so like the CW too. Like that's really like,
yes. CW. Well, and I was obsessed with Jared Leto at that time, so like I had to have a Jared. So.
Okay, so anyway, where'd you find these names then? Sorry.
So it was very much like I wanted something similar that resonated. So Aria was a little bit easier because we were like, okay, Lena, Aria, that perfect, done. Pax, we had like, I think like 10 different names that we threw out. And then we just kind of went through them all and, like, I like this one, don't like this one. I have a great team that helps me with that kind of stuff. And we just narrowed it down to Pax.
Yeah. Well, it still has a bit of a like other feel to it. Like it's not too, it's not like matte. It's not too like normal.
Yeah. Got a little flair.
Yeah. And then, did you do any research on mental facilities for this book, and what kind did you look into?
So I'll just be like open and raw about this, and because she doesn't mind me sharing this, my daughter actually had a similar an experience in a facility when she was a teenager, and it was really traumatic for both of us, and there was a lot of fears I think that were born from the mental facility and like us not understanding, and just like a really volatile point in her life. And
each of us coming to this point where we really could be open with each other and all of that. So this was, that whole piece was kind of like an ode to her, like
Yeah.
as she went through her own struggles and, you know, what I view as like demons in her mind that that she struggled with, and seeing her overcome them. So this is, you know, not only did I want to like write a story about a true good versus evil spiritual battles, which I believe in, I wanted it to be for her as well, the
Yeah.
story for her.
Wow. Okay. Love to hear that. I mean, thank you for sharing that. Um, do you kind of see, this is again a question for me, do you kind of see like what Pax and Arya do as like that they're guardian angels for the people? Like, is that what you see them as kind of doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay. I like that. I like that.
Mhm.
Well, I'm gonna let you go. I see it's getting dark on you there
It
too.
is. I'm gonna go have dinner with local author friends Rebecca Jenshak and Renee Rose. So
Oh, great. I love it. But
yeah.
I appreciate this so much, Amy. Thank you for stopping
Oh,
by and
Jen, this is so
congratulations on the
fun.
book. And I can't wait for the book coming next month. Tell everyone what's coming in February.
Yeah, Under an Endless Moon. I'm so excited.
Yes. All right. Well, thanks so much, everybody. And we'll see
Thanks,
you for the
everyone.
next one.
All right.
Bye.
Have a good night.
You too.